In today's show, the latest buzz around Pascal Siakam and Zion Williamson. Plus, it's Shaedon Sharpe off limits in Blazers trade talks. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen. Free on all platforms, Monday through Friday, coming at you every single weekday. So make it a part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's show, we are still chugging along towards the NBA draft. We've got the latest buzz surrounding the Blazers and Pascal Siakam and Zion Williamson. We'll talk Shaedon Sharpe. Is he off limits in a trade, or is he the piece that gets this deal done? Is it a decision between Sharpe and Dame? It's a tough one. Talk about that in the second segment. And then I have found the latest mock drafts, and we'll round them up. Who are the Blazers taking at 3? We'll talk about that in the final segment. But first, let's start with the latest buzz. This is kind of this is the week for the sort of rumor mill to truly heat up. With the obvious caveat that it's like smokescreen season and lying season and all of that, but trust the people you trust this time of year, and if there's some people that are new in your world of reporting, make sure that you can trust them as well. But someone I really trust, friend of the program, Rafael Barlow, many time guest of the show, and also just like a public Blazers fan. If you ask him, he'll tell you that's who he roots for. Grew up rooting for him in Nebraska, still a big fan of them now, and also just a straight up excellent NBA draft reporter. Rafael reports on his Big Board newsletter, which you can subscribe to. Actually, I'll even do this real quick. I have free subscriptions to Rafael's Big Board newsletter. Email me, lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com. Tell me why you deserve to get a free subscription to the newsletter, and I will hook you up. I'll choose the best ones. I got 3 to give out. Email me, lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com. But friend of the program, Rafael Barlow, on that very newsletter, where you get all types of good draft intel, reports the following: that he is hearing that there is a good chance Portland will move this pick, that pick being the number 3 overall pick. Pascal Siakam, Raptors forward Pascal Siakam, is often mentioned as the Blazers' primary target. But Barlow goes on to wonder in that same blurb, is Portland willing to give up Shaedon Sharpe to make the deal work? More on that in a little bit, but this just connects with everything that we've been hearing, that the Blazers are like legitimately interested in Pascal Siakam. He's really good. I think I said when I did my trade show I actually did would the Blazers put together a trade package for Pascal Siakam? I did it with Sean Woodley of Locked On Raptors about a month ago. It's waiting in your feeds wherever you're listening to this one. I said that Pascal Siakam was probably the best player the Blazers could trade for in the market. He's really stinking good. Like, he's something like one of the 20 or 25 best players in the league. He's an elite forward, like in a league that's prioritized position. He's not like the craziest lockdown defender ever, but he's a totally competent and good capable of being a good part of a very good defense. Maybe a little slower, guards 4s and 5s better than smaller guys, but like a solid team defender. Has improved as a playmaker, can be a primary creator. It's just like a really good basketball player. He's an all NBA or fringe on all NBA type of player. And the Blazers, 3, and it would have to be Anthony Simons just to make the money work, unless you got really creative and gave them a bunch of other parts. But 3 and Ants seems like the sticking point of probably a conversation that the Raptors and Blazers have had a cajillion times. The other. And I think Raphael's report confirms that this is an ongoing thing that the Blazers will absolutely consider on draft night. The problem is, if the sweetener that the Raptors need is Shaedon Sharpe, that's a hitch. And I'll talk about that more later in the show. The reporting surrounding folks outside of the Raptors is that Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster, who run the Raptors, are just still asking for a king's ransom, or a dinosaur's ransom, I guess is more accurate. A dinosaur's ransom to get OG Anunoby or Pascal Siakam. Is like the asking price remains very, very high. And to that point, I will just say, deadline spur actions. Of course, the asking price is going to be high right now, but when the clock is ticking on 2, the clock is ticking on 3, or if they wait, the clock is ticking on 7 with the Pacers, you kind of got to make a decision. It has to happen. It's like, are you gonna get your guy in the draft? Are you gonna pass it on by? Pascal Siakam is entering free agency this summer. If the Raptors are going to, he can, if they want, he could easily be part of the plan into the future and blah, 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 blah. But if they're going to go another direction, it seems like draft night would be the night to make that decision. Certainly the Blazers are going to pursue Pascal Siakam. The other sort of buzz coming around is that the Pelicans may seriously be considering trading Zion Williamson. Bill Simmons of The Ringer said someone that he trusts told him that Zion's going to be traded on draft night. Kevin O'Connor of The Ringer reported that the Blazers would, in a deal with New Orleans, the Blazers would prefer Zion to Brandon Ingram. I will say that a friend of the program, Jake Madison, the host of Locked On Pelicans, has said that he has heard that the Pelicans may be cooled a little bit on trading Zion, but certainly, there's a world in which it happens, and I think, there's sort of, I don't know if conflicting reports, but there's all types of chatter on will they, won't they. Mark Stein on his newsletter said that it was kind of unclear what the Pelicans would do, although they had certainly considered it at one point. Obviously, the Pelicans' rumored interest is in Scoot Henderson, so for the Blazers to get involved, it would mean that Brandon Miller would have to go 2, and Scoot Henderson would have to be on the board at 3, and then they can call New Orleans and kind of figure out a framework quickly. Obviously, they'll figure out most of the framework before then, but it's like you determine your direction based on what happens. Like you can line up all your contingencies, and then you got to determine your direction once you're on the clock. And the Blazers will almost undoubtedly have to wait till they're on the clock to make final determinations one way or another, like the direction of the franchise for the next half decade or whatever it might be. I have said this other places. I've said it on the Locked On Sports Today podcast. I think I said it when I was on AM radio today. Shout out to all my homies holding it down for the amplitude modification airwaves. But I probably am more in favor of trading for Zion now than I was when this rumor initially hit. And let me just say why. I get the red flags. The dude doesn't play very much. He played 40 games the last 2 years, 39 games the last 2 years. Availability is a huge deal for him. Perhaps commitment to getting his body right. Perhaps just commitment to like being an NBA dude. There's some from reporting from Brian Windhorst of ESPN that's like Zion like doesn't have a great relationship with the organization, doesn't have a great relationship with his teammates. It's like maybe just like not super into being an NBA guy. Like you gotta love it. It is too hard to play the game to kind of cruise, particularly when you have some other, when you just have a body type like he does. He's just a big dude who would need to get in wild shape to be the explosive athlete he can be. But when Zion plays, he's so stinking good. And so I'm in favor of it because, and this is my sort of logic, Portland is not in a place where they should be risk averse. If they are risk averse, right? If they're like, let's not do it, they should trade Damian Lillard, go young, and build with a long tail rebuild because that's the risk averse path. A bunch of different shots at having top draft picks and but have an opportunity to get good through the draft. If they are risk averse, that's the way they should go. But if they want Dame, I think they should take the biggest risks. Their chance to build a championship level contender with Damian Lillard still in his prime is small. It is a very small window, a very, very narrow path to navigate. So I think they should take the biggest swing that they possibly could in order to get closest. And Zion Williamson is the best player they could trade for. It's like too contingent on a million things. Do the Pelicans even want to trade him? Is Scoot Henderson there? Like it's deep into the hypothetical, so I'm not going to go much further, but I want to get my take on the record. I have softened, and I think I'm now straight up in favor of it because it is the biggest upside swing you could make. And if you're going to try to win a championship with Damian Lillard, you should make the biggest upside swings possible, because if you are building a risk averse, if you have an aversion to taking risks at this stage in the Damian Lillard process of team building, get out of here. The last regime was pretty risk averse, and they built consistently competitive teams. This isn't time to build a consistently competitive team. If it is, go young, blow it up. Okay. The report from Rafael Barlow, friend of the program, says that kind of intimates that the Raptors' asking price would be Shaedon Sharpe. And perhaps in a trade for any star, the asking price would be Shaedon Sharpe. And to be clear, I consider Pascal Siakam a star. He absolutely is. So I think the question that we have to ask is Shaedon Sharpe off limits? That's what we'll do in the second segment. But first, I want to tell you that today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Look, there are a lot of ways and a lot of different avenues to get therapy, and BetterHelp is one of the most affordable and most convenient ways to do so. Therapy can give you the tools to find more balance in your life so you can keep supporting those around you without leaving yourself behind. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. You can find more balance with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. All right. Let's talk a little bit about Anthony Simons. Let's talk a little bit about Shaedon Sharpe. We'll mention Anthony Simons too, I promise. But I think the Blazers find themselves in a position where bargaining will get easier as the clock is ticking on draft night, but the asking price for what they're trying to do is going to remain high until then and may remain high then as well. And I think it's because Portland's plan is clear. They want win now help. And if you're trying to get win now veteran help, the ask is going to be high. I think some of this is like the Rudy Gobert trade for a star kind of changed the market a little bit. I think some of this is, and the market changes, like the last year's price, last summer's price ain't this summer's price. It's just, that's not how it works. But I think like it's the start of the negotiations. They're like, well, if Rudy Gobert got a cajillion picks and Walker Kessler and all this stuff, it's like, but I don't think like necessarily last summer matters beyond the negotiation starting points. But I also think that like one of the problems with the Blazers, like they're particularly like if they're really pursuing Pascal Siakam, is that the Raptors just they're going to ask for the world. They're going to ask for a dinosaur's ransom, the dino's ransom. And the part of the calculation of asking is Shaedon Sharpe off limits or should he be off limits, is that the Blazers to make a trade for a big money for like a large contract for a Pascal Siakam making 38 plus, 35 plus, for Zion Williamson, his is a little bit trickier because depending on when you trade, but for the receiving team, $34 million. That's what it would be. We don't need to get too in the weeds, but about $30 million or about $35 million. Is that to make it work, it has to start with Anthony Simons, and to entice the team beyond Anthony Simons, to entice the team for like a true high-level star, it probably has to be 3. If the Blazers had a bunch of their future first-round picks available to trade, maybe you could say, hey, 23 and picks down the line, and obviously they could unlock those picks in if they were to complete some sort of transaction with the Bulls in order to get those picks back one way or another. Like if they really wanted to do it, there are mechanisms to do it, or they could trade like with the language like the next available pick, blah, 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 blah. Not as appealing to teams. That's just like not as an appealing package. So I don't think it's that easy, but certainly it's like within the realm of the CBA. But if the asking price is 3 plus Anthony Simons, also including Shaedon Sharpe in the deal, is pretty much all of your best trade assets, which means that if you get Pascal Siakam and you are darn good, but not much better than the 5th best team in the West, you have not only exhausted all of your best things to trade, you've exhausted your best young players that could grow with that core and be really good. Shaedon Sharpe's being off limits is tied to the idea that you have to trade Anthony Simons to get this done. Because if you trade your enticing 23-year-old on a long-term, totally reasonable contract, and your 20-year-old entering his second year in the league who looks like he could also turn into a really, really impressive player at some point, you are kind of cashing in all of your chips. Not to mention that with those two, you'd also probably, almost certainly in these trades, the asking price would also include 3. Now, if it's Sharpe and Ant and 23, I think that does change the calculation a little bit, but let's assume for the purposes of dealing with Masai Ujiri in this hypothetical, it's 3 Ant and Shaedon Sharpe. To me, that is way too much for Pascal Siakam. I think 3 and Anthony Simons is likely an overpay for Pascal Siakam, but I think it's an overpay that you could stomach because of how good Siakam is, and he would be the best player that Dame has played with in a long time, arguably the best player he's ever played with, depending on your feelings on LaMarcus Aldridge. Like, they would immediately be an awesome pairing that could work together, that could run actions together. They could run inverted pick and rolls where Dame sets screens. Like, there's all kinds of fun basketball stuff that could happen. I'm excited to talk about basketball again when we can finally do it and stop talking transaction game. But Sharpe has real potential. I will say this about young players. He was a below average rookie, even by rookie standards, for most of the year. But when he finally put it together at the end of the season, like he took strides in February, started to make real strides in February. Okay, this, he had like a 10-day stretch in February. Like, okay, he's starting to get it. Kind of, hit a little rough patch again. He's 19, figuring out the league. And then to close the season, when they put the ball in his hands, he looked like he could be a star in the league quickly. Some of that is because he got all of those developmental minutes, and some of that is because, he's just a guy who needed seasoning. Part of the developmental minutes is that he needed seasoning, and part of that is probably just like the stakes changed. It's like he looked darn good in the games they weren't trying to win. He looked like, he went, I think that like the second to last game against the Clippers trying to win that game, playing the regular guys, and Sharpe is playing, most of 3 quarters pretty competitively against a playoff team. Like that was they didn't have PG and Kawhi Leonard, but like they had a team that eventually won a playoff game. I think there were moments when it was like, oh, Shaedon Sharpe can ball. Like he scoring the final 4 minutes where he took over against Minnesota. That's, a team again that like won a playoff game. There were moments when you could see how special he was. It's 10 games. It's a small sample. Development is non-linear. It doesn't mean that his graph continues to go straight up. There is like a very reasonable world where Shaedon Sharpe at age 20 is still a below average NBA player to begin the season and develops into a really good one. The question is the timeline of when with all of this stuff, when with the Damian Lillard timeline doesn't make sense. But the Blazers have signaled, according to the reporting from Josh Lloyd back in April, the Blazers want to keep Shaedon Sharpe. They do not want him to be involved in trades, and all of the reporting since then has backed that up, that the Blazers are not interested in trading Shaedon Sharpe. But, so I mean, for obvious reasons, right? Before we get to the but, let's back up from the but real quick. Showed signs of being really good. They drafted him 7th. Like they did all that losing to get him. They chose not to trade that trade on draft night, trade that pick on draft night last year to say, okay, Sharpe is more valuable than what we're getting back, or what we could get back. We're going to keep this pick. That he played 80 games this year, was a big part of the rotation. Obviously, the Blazers weren't very good, so he was a big part of a bad team. But like he was, even when they were trying to be competitive, he was part of the regular rotation. And he showed flashes of having real upside. And like he's a dude who just didn't early on, looks like didn't really know how to play the NBA game, but there were flashes. And as he slowly learned the NBA game, it's like more consistent flashes and more of his game and more on-ball creation stuff. Like he looked really good to end the year. But there's a world in which it doesn't. The graph is not linear, right? And that it bounces around a little bit and that he struggles, and it's like he's going to be 20 in the league. It is, I'm probably lower on just like young players maybe than your average dude who yells into the microphone on one of these shows. But like, young players typically struggle. So I wouldn't be surprising if Shaedon Sharpe was again like a below average NBA player to begin the year, or, had patches where he's just like struggles, right? Young players struggle. It's a tough league. I think he's going to be a very good player. My question is kind of when. And the Blazers don't want to trade him because they also think he's going to be a really good player. But, and I think this is the part that's like, Shaedon Sharpe does appear to be off limits. But what if the deal on draft night is, we can get this done, we can make this trade, Shaedon Sharpe has to be included. But if you don't, then there's no deal. You are taking 3, you're taking Brandon Miller at 3, you're keeping Shaedon Sharpe, and you're going to have the conversation later this evening about Damian Lillard's future with the franchise. Dame has been very clear himself. Like, you don't need to parse anything. Just listen to Dame's words. He wants them to trade the pick for win now help. If they don't do that because they're unwilling to trade Sharpe and they don't get a deal done, are they choosing Shaedon Sharpe and Brandon Miller over Dame? Yeah, like that's effectively what it would be. And so then when you ask yourself, is Shaedon Sharpe off limits? It's the domino effect of making that proclamation. If those dinosaurs in Toronto, if they hold out and say Sharpe or nothing, then the nothing has real implications for the Blazers. In my opinion, when they decided to draft Sharpe, they launched this. I think 2 timelines is slightly a misnomer. What timelines means is that the young players aren't ready to help. When young players are good, like Tyrese Maxey in Philly, when he's like totally capable of being a contributor on a playoff team, they don't talk about timelines. It's not about timelines. You talk about timelines when young players aren't good enough to contribute to high-level winning, and most young players aren't. When they drafted Shaedon Sharpe, they launched this 2 timelines thing because he wasn't going to be ready to be a high-level contributor. He might be soon. He might be in December. He might be in March. He might be, and when he is, he might be really stinking good, which is why they don't want to trade him. But it is... When they decided to keep that pick and they didn't trade for veteran help last year, they launched this situation where they have young players who do need to play and do need developmental minutes, are going to be negatives. And Sharpe, like, to be clear, for 65 games was a net negative. He just was a net negative with really fun moments where you could see that one day he won't be. When they decided to do that, they put them in this weird spot where they're going to have to make another tough decision in the future. It's why I was in favor of trading the pick last year, and while I'm not in favor of trading the pick now, I think they've gone too far down this path, and they should just load up on youngsters. But it's easy for me to say that because I do not have the responsibility of dealing with Damian Lillard and his camp. I do not have the responsibility of being the executive that trades the franchise icon. I'm just a dude in the basement who thinks like young players are good and you want to have them. And even if it takes a little while to get ready, you're not going to have that many picks to have players as good as, a Shaedon Sharpe and a Scoot Henderson or Shaedon Sharpe, Brandon Miller on the roster who like under team control for 8 seasons. Oh man, it's so tantalizing. But I think if you're asking yourself, is Shaedon Sharpe off limits? You can say, yes, bang the table. Yes, he's off limits. Don't trade him under any circumstances. If the circumstances are picking between Dame and Shea, ask yourself, what would you do? I don't really know. To be honest, I think I would... I think I would lean young, but I think it's, again, I think it's easier for me to say that here. If you're trying to be competitive immediately, there's no world where Damian Lillard isn't to help you be competitive immediately. But there is a cost for me that seems a little too high, and 3 and Sharpe and Ant seems a little too high. Okay, third segment. Let's round up the mock drafts. I've rounded up the recent mock drafts, all published within the last week. I will share those with you to close the show. But first, let me tell you about Ibotta. Look, you're gonna buy stuff. You're gonna do house projects. You're going to buy cool stuff for the garden. You're going to buy your kids stuff. You're going to just go buy groceries because you need to eat. If you're going to buy stuff, why not earn money back on those shopping trips? Ibotta gives you cash back on hundreds of grocery items, produce, personal care, pantry goods. You can either link your loyalty account or upload your receipt after you shop and get your cash back. It's that easy. The average Ibotta user earns $120 a year in real cash back. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, or you could use your cash back to buy that airline tickets or go to a game or just take yourself out to a fancy dinner. Ibotta gives you real cash back, not points. Other apps give you points that don't really amount to much. With Ibotta, you get real cash back that you can use to cash out to your bank account, or you can send it to PayPal, or you can get a gift card, and you can earn cash back on hundreds of online brands and retailers when you start with Ibotta, including Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and a whole bunch more. So right now, Ibotta is offering my listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKED when you register. Go to the App Store or Google Play and download the free Ibotta app and use the code LOCKED. That's Ibotta, Ibotta, in the Google Play or App Stores. Use that code LOCKED. Still a pass first point guard. Still Mike Richmond. You are still listening to Locked On Blazers. Let's talk mock drafts. I have gone to the internet and I have read all of the mock drafts. All of these are published within the last week. Some sort of draft people I trust just haven't done one in the last week. I guess John Wasserman, specifically at Bleacher Report, he did his last one in the first week of June and says, no more mock drafts. I'll just do draft reporting. And he's certainly done a lot of that. He's just not publishing a true mock draft prior to the draft. But I've gone around the world. I've gone around the web, and I've found him. Over at ESPN, Jonathan Givony has the Blazers taking Scoot at 3. At The Ringer, Kevin O'Connor has the Blazers taking Scoot Henderson at 3. At Yahoo, Kristen Peak has the Blazers taking Brandon Miller at 3. At SB Nation, Ricky O'Donnell has the Blazers taking Amen Thompson. Shake up, baby. Way to go, Ricky. Has them taking Amen Thompson at 3. At The Athletic, Sam Vecini has the Blazers taking Brandon Miller at 3. And on NBA Big Board, Raphael Barlow has the Blazers taking Scoot Henderson at 3. That's 3 Scoots, 2 Millers, and an Amen in your scorecard. The question is, Blazers aren't really the ones to make this decision in a lot of ways. What happens at 2 will dictate their choices. And then once their choices are dictated, they will determine whether they want to make this trade, make this pick, or trade the pick potentially. And as I mentioned in that first segment, the Blazers definitely still open to trading Anthony Simons in number 3. It's what else they'll include to get it done. And I think deadline spur actions, those 5 minutes, will allow them to really kind of figure it out. Obviously they're going to talk contingencies with 6-7 different teams or whatever, but like they'll figure that once their choice is clear, who they are able to choose, they will be able to determine what direction they go. I will say Jonathan Wasserman, who I just mentioned, who I look for as someone who I've been reading his mock drafts for a decade, roughly. He over at Bleacher Report, Was says that there is sort of conflicting information over whether the Hornets will go Scoot or will they go Brandon Miller. That's Scoot Henderson or Brandon Miller. I think Brandon Miller, to be clear, fits better with the Blazers if they were to keep Dame in tow, but it does really sound like if the Blazers don't trade 3, Dame is going to have a strong consideration about his future with the franchise. It seems pretty binary now. If they end up making that selection, they're probably selecting the rebuild path as opposed to the Dame path. So this is the Blazers, it seems like, at least on reading the tea leaves, you're listening to Tuesday, June 20th show. I'm recording on a Monday evening. It seems like it's pretty binary now. Trade the pick or figure out what's next with Dame. But Wasserman over at Bleacher Report says that within the Hornets, who are kind of going to dictate the Blazers' plans here, that there are both pro-Scoot and pro-Brandon Miller camps. And the reason that that's important is because Scoot Henderson was kind of just pegged to be that. Everyone was saying it was, the Hornets are leaning Brandon Miller. And then on the lottery nights, Mitch Kupchak kind of said, well, we would kind of lean Fitz with our pick. And it kind of led a little more credence to that belief. It's like they're leaning Brandon Miller. Now, many mock drafts had Brandon Miller as 2 and Scoot falling to the Blazers at 3. I think generally speaking, Scoot is considered a higher level prospect, which gave the Blazers just like a whole bunch of trade ammo and Zion Williamson dreams and all that stuff. But I think it's been widely reported by a couple different places that both Henderson and Miller were back in Charlotte on Monday and met with the Hornets ownership, Michael Jordan, and the folks who the minority owner who's about to become the majority owner when the sale closes, and Jordan takes a step back, and they were going to do, a second little workout and meet with ownership. The kind of thing you do when you're kind of really, the meeting with ownership is the big, with these big decisions, that is often meet with the GMs, meet with the front office folks, meet with the owner, and kind of then all of the biggest decision makers within the franchise can kind of make that final decision. This I think matters. I don't talk betting odds a lot on here. There's FanDuel is the official sports betting app of the Locked On Podcast Network, so I do some ad reads for them, but I don't often do lines on this show. But I do think during draft season, watching the betting lines has typically been a pretty good predictor of this. And last week, all the betting lines had Brandon Miller as more likely to be the number 2 overall pick. And over the weekend, from Friday to as I'm recording this on Monday evening, they have FanDuel and others I looked at, but FanDuel specifically has Scoot Henderson at minus 260 to go number 2 overall. If you're not familiar with gambling, the minus numbers mean more likely, the plus numbers mean with little plus means less likely, means longer odds. So it seems that the betting world has shifted to believing that Scoot will be the second overall pick. Seemed always that Scoot was the second best prospect from pretty much everyone except for my man Rafael Barlow. It seems that is the way that the betting lines are leaning. And I will say last year, everybody had Jabari Smith, including all the odds makers everywhere. And then it shifted overnight, like draft night. Paolo Banchero became the heavy favorite in the betting world to go number one overall. They had it, like it kind of like wake up at 6 a.m. on the West Coast. And it's like, I mean, it's 9 a.m. in New York or whatever, betting central. But like it is, this seems to be the way that the intel from the world that seems to know things is leaning, is that Scoot's going to be the guy, which means it'll be Brandon Miller at 3. Blazers will have to gauge what the trade package is for a likely Brandon Miller and Anfernee Simons for a win now veteran, or if the value's not there. And they've got to judge what the value is. They can't if you overpay and you do include Sharpe in these trades. Like I said, you just have so few. You just have a lot less avenues to improve either internally or via a future trade. And they'll have to weigh what it is. And if they don't find value there, they'll have to have a tough conversation with a franchise icon. Oof, y'all. I'm gonna be honest. You listened to the end of this program. You made it. You made it to like the 30 plus minute mark. I'm ready for it to be over. I'm ready for draft night to be here and just like not have to do the speculation stuff and have that sort of like, I think the world in which this is Damian Lillard's last week with the Blazers it's sad. It's a sad thing. Regardless of whatever you're rooting for, I think like you can agree that it's like an emotional thing. And I'm ready for it just to be done. I'm ready for the decision to be made and like to go into the world to go into the microphone with some certainty. I think we'll probably get it on Thursday, which means Friday's show will have some certainty. We're going to have to do a couple more shows before then. We'll have shows Wednesday and Thursday waiting in your feeds. It's what we do 5 days a week, available wherever you get podcasts. Tell your friends about the show. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.